Hello again. Uh, Sorry for the long hiatus. I seem to be saying that a lot, but never mind, we are here again. This video, as you will glean from the title, is an expression of my initial impressions of President Donald Trump. He wasn't president at the time of me making these views. I was watching Joe Rogan interview him, and I found the interview quite interesting and informative. Now, I did actually start off with a sheaf of notes. I had this notepad. I was writing everything down that I thought of about Donald Trump, and about halfway through the interview, I sort of discarded the notes because there was this sense of familiarity with the man that troubled me. Then all of a sudden it fell into place. I knew where I'd heard his or saw his personality before, and it was with a gentleman of my previous acquaintance, we'll say, a bloke I used to know back in the day. Now, for a bit of context as to who this fella was, is when I was about 12 or 13, I think it was 13, I was a fairly pathetic is the word some people might use. I was a very insecure, very emotionally fragile kid. Not very aggressive. I don't see that as a negative, but I wasn't very aggressive. I wasn't a fighter. I wouldn't. I was quite willing to let people push me around, and my brother was persuaded to go to a karate club with a friend of his, and I followed him to this karate club, and the instructor, who shall remain nameless, is the gentleman in question. And I trained with him from the age of 13 till the age of about 24, at which point I did literally struggle to be in the same room as him. And in Trump, I saw many of the traits that I saw in that man. Now, I've held off making this video, partly the January blues. I had another few things on my plate, but also I didn't really want to make this video to affect or influence the election. I don't think I'm qualified to be telling people how to vote for presidential elections or any elections, to be honest. So I was going to do it earlier, then I said, well, you can't be posting shit like this, Paul, but just before an election, everybody's going to be thinking, mind your own business, because, at the end of the day, it's not my election. I'm not voting anybody in America. So I withheld it, and then I procrastinated, and I made a couple of more videos, and then here we are. And it's not like a painful thing, it's just a technically difficult thing, because when I think about this, it's difficult not to start just going off on one about the fellow I'm talking about. But some comparison, some information about this man has to be shared just to draw a comparison. And the comparisons I noticed when Trump spoke, he was very reluctant to be shown as wrong. He seemed to like to change the subject if he was going to get something wrong. They were talking about like his first day as president, the first time round, and he started going on about bedrooms and tried to start putting little anecdotes of history, which I understand he got wrong. I believe he misremembered the chronological order of when the president's son actually died, something like that. I personally don't know the chronological order of when Trump died, but a friend of mine who does like American history did. I think Rogan said he got something else wrong, but he didn't want to pull him up too much because he didn't want him tripping over himself to correct or double down. And that would derail the interview. But I did remember this fella in the 10 or so years I knew him, and at first, to me, who was a young man with a hole in my life, we'll say, a boy really, not a man, and I saw a great deal of charisma in him, and he wasn't a bad martial artist. He was a braggart. Everybody thought he was a braggart, but you know, it's forgivable. And when you don't have much confidence, you tend to perhaps idolize people who do. Now, this lasted a few years, and then I started becoming useful to him, and that's when it started changing a little bit, when he could get something a bit useful out of me. Now, what do I mean by useful? He basically found out he could ask me for completely unreasonable favours, and more or less suggest there will be repercussions if I didn't do them. And some of the favours were like lifts that were completely out of my way. I got a driver's license, and he decided that he didn't want to drive if he didn't have to, and he would just phone up and he'd say, I actually remember the phone calls. He'd say, "Will you give me a lift?" It's not, "Can you give me a lift?" It's like, "Will you give me a lift?" I'm like, "But you know, I was going to walk there, Tim. It's like half a mile from my house." "Oh, well, no, I'm short on petrol. Can you give me a lift? Can you borrow your mother's car, drive 7 miles down the road to pick us up, drive 7 miles back up the road to, to the lesson, sit there and wait for me in the pub after I have 3 pints, talk shite for an hour, and then drive me back 7 miles back down the road and 7 miles back up the road so you can go to bed." Which was basically it. And yeah, it was my fault. I should have said no, but he shouldn't have asked. And it went from there, really, to the point that I was actually ejected from his lesson once for basically just losing my temper with him. He was very fond of being the centre of attention. He didn't like to look like he didn't know anything. We're talking about karate fella here, not Trump. But this is what I got from watching Trump. He was very fond of being the centre of attention. He was very fond of looking competent, being in charge, which suggests to me he was a very insecure man. He would quite cheerfully lie or change the subject just to look right and to talk over people. I noticed Trump made a few attempts to talk over Rogan, but he didn't manage. Rogan stopped him. When he would start on a subject and he'd go, "Ah, yeah, but I know this, that, and Rogan would just basically keep going like he hadn't started." But this fella would do that a lot. I think that's one of the things that clicked us onto him. And he would just do a lot of stuff like that. It was interesting. I didn't get on with him partly because I was too meek, and then he started being more and more and more unreasonable. If you put your foot down with him, he tended to be a bit more reasonable. I'll give you an example. My brother did actually. It was sitting there, and I've forgotten what it was. He wanted my brother to do something, and it was probably unreasonable. And my brother said flat out, "No, I'm not doing that." "Well, why not?" I says, "I'm busy. I'm busy. I've got stuff to do. You can do it yourself." And he did, and he sort of couched it as a joke, like, "Well, do you want your black belt?" And my brother basically just says, "You can keep your fucking black belt if I've got to crawl up your arse for it." But I never had that self-confidence, and he knew he could hold things over my head. He knew he could hold ossification over my head, so he did. For years, he held me back on my black belt. And I do believe purely it was because he knew he didn't have to give me it for me to keep coming to his lesson, and two, just purely because I think it gave him a sense of power. And I truly truly think Trump possibly has those personality flaws. He will hold things over people's head. He seems to, even in the past few weeks, he seems to be like pushing around his power. We'll say, bragging about how he's going to sort things out. This fella, he was always bragging about how he'd come up with things that would make his karate much better. I believe my brother went back to see him a few years ago, because they never really fell out, because as soon as he realised he couldn't push Neil around, he sort of minded himself with him. And he went back and he was like saying, "Oh, look at the new training methods I've come up with." And my brother said, like, "Well, they're the same as the old ones, Tim. They don't look any different." And you know what I mean? It has to be said though, when Neil didn't let him push him round, the first thing he did was bring me aside and start telling me how much better I was than him and how arrogant my brother was, and he started calling him shit behind his back. We see a bit of that in Trump as well, perhaps. It's a bit galling. Now, my major concern with coming to all these conclusions about Donald Trump is I don't really want to say he's going to be a bad president. He's been president before. We've got him for 4 years. We might as well, well, I say we, America, the USA has him for president. He, like I said, he started doing the whole thing where he thinks he can push people around. He's trying to push Canada around a bit, I believe, with these tariffs, and I believe Trudeau's made a concession to him, or not a concession. It's very odd. I was watching the rest of politics and they were talking about it. Alistair Campbell doesn't seem to think it's a concession, but I don't know. He seems to have just given him something just to shut him up. I don't know what's going on with Mexico. Greenland seems to be holding out, thank Christ. I mean, he's saying a lot of stuff. Some of it just sounds crackers to me, but maybe he's just trying to keep the attention on himself. Perhaps because he likes the attention, perhaps because he knows how to keep an audience entertained. And I certainly feel compelled to know what he's doing. I didn't feel compelled to know what Biden was up to, but I feel compelled to know what Trump is up to. But it's worrying. I said I didn't want to tell nobody how to vote, and I won't. I think one of the odd questions that I asked myself is as to how I would vote, and if somebody said to me, "Well, who would you vote for Donald Trump?" And the question is against who? I gave myself the mental problem of what would I do if I lived in America and had the right to vote. You see, all right, if let's just say Trump against Barack Obama. I didn't mind Obama. It was a bit before I started paying any attention to politics, but he seemed to be harmless enough. I mean, he did a few things, obviously, and some people kicked off, but by and large, Obama would get my vote over Trump. With Biden, it was a little bit. I was there for the Biden vote, not because I didn't think Biden was well past his prime. I think they should have stuck him in the freezer for a couple of years. I think his best before date was last week, but I was sort of Biden. Harris, I sort of thought I would vote for Harris, but again, it's difficult. She did herself no favours on that, we lost speech, because it didn't sound like she'd lost. I was listening to it and she sounded dead upset and a bit slurred. I don't know, maybe she was tired. Been a long, 100 days. It wasn't that long a campaign, was it? Shit. At least it was full of hope and joy. Words I've always attributed to presidential campaigns. Yeah. But yes, this is the this is what we're stuck with. But Trump's mannerisms in that meeting, which is what I wanted to talk about, not his ability as a president, because how am I to judge what would make a president? The only thing I know about being a good president is I can't do it. I would run a mile before taking that job. If I had to choose one good thing about, one good trait for being a president, it's delegation and knowing who knows what to do. It's the ability to say, well, let's ask such and such because that's their areas of expertise. Trump can't do that. He's got to be the cleverest bugger in the room. We'll go back to the other fella, I won't call myself an expert, but I have had considerable experience in martial arts other than karate, one of them being capoeira, and this never once stopped this man I'm talking about interrupting me to tell me what capoeira was. I remember I was sitting there down, and this is when I wasn't experienced, but I had been doing it for, longer than him, we'll say that. And I still remember because I said, I'm going to capoeira tomorrow. I was sitting at the karate in the pub after the lesson, and one of the ladies said, well, what's that, Paul? And I says, well, it's this Brazilian, and I was about to tell her, and then he just cut straight across me. It's from Savat, Paul, which is a French martial art. And I'm like, no, it's not. It is from Savat, and he started telling us that and it was based purely on something he read in a magazine or assumed. I'm like, but it's not. And I was trying to say, no, there's Savat influences because one of the masters admitted as much in a book. And he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't have it that I knew better than him. He tried to, my brother was a black belt in Aikido, and he would have it that his Aikido was better than my brother's, even though he's never done it. And he did once try and demonstrate it. And I remember my brother came home because it was after I'd washed my hands of him. And he goes, it was fucking ridiculous, Paul. He was terrible. He says, I know what to look for now. And he says he was trying to do this Aikido and he just didn't have a clue. But he'll sit there and act the expert, and that's what Trump's like. He'll act the expert. The crux of me just washing my hands of this Tim was, and I believe this is pertinent to Trump too, was when he tried to get me to do some work for him, and the work was, I thought it was unpaid. I knew he got paid for that lesson when he did it, but he was going on a trip, and he asked me to spot him in that lesson, and I thought it was just to keep the lesson going. I found out later that he was planning, I found out from the staff at the leisure centre, that he was planning to take the money that lesson generated and just keep it. He hadn't mentioned it to me at all, and I went mental. It was a very embarrassing thing because he got caught putting pay slips in to claim the money for that lesson, and they said, well, you can't, Tim, you've already put a leave request in for that week. That lesson is not happening. And he, in his mind, that twisted round to only people who have a certain police check can do the lesson, which was completely false. He was the only one who could do that lesson because he was the one hired by the local council to do that lesson. But this translated to him as, I got to get Paul to have a police check, or I won't get the money for that lesson. So he came flying in the normal lesson, and I went to say hello, and he went, have you got a police check? And I went, what? Have you got a police check? I went, he says, fill that in. No hello or anything. And I'm like, why? No, just fill it in. Just for the lesson, just in case for the lesson on Friday. I'm like, what? And he said, and your brother's got a police check. I'm identical twin. He goes, just clear me your brother and go down and take the lesson. I'm like, I can't do that. Oh no, just do it. It'll be fine. Just do it. And my brother's like, no, he can't do that. And I'm standing holding this fucking form in my hand, like, what the fuck's going on? So I went, I don't know what he's on about. I ignored the form. I drove down to the lesson, and obviously Tim had hoped the lesson was on. The karate guy had hoped the lesson was on. So I was standing in a karate suit in this hall, waiting for this lesson to start, and then somebody from the reception area came down and says, I'm sorry, the lesson's not on. I says, no, it's on. I'm doing it. I know Tim's away. He goes, no, we've cancelled the lesson. You can't do the lesson. I says, this is police check thing. She goes, no, you just don't work for the council. I'm like, what? Did you tell Tim this? She goes, well, yeah, we're caught him putting his pay slips in. And I went, are you fucking joking? He was putting pay slips in, and I was mad. And I was made even more furious, and this is why I was struggling with this video, because I keep going on about this. So, because he told all the kids that the lesson was on, so I had to stand in the foyer and apologise to these kids. And it just, honestly, when I heard Trump talking, I just remembered all of that. I said, there is some prick who will tell you to do something. He'll talk over you rather than explain it to you. He'll talk over you. And you'll be standing there with a bloody useless certificate in your hand, which you've got to sign, with barely a clue what's going on, and then you'll go and make an ass of yourself because you haven't been told. It's probably against the law. And that is sort of, this is why it was difficult for me to articulate this, because it gets personal. And it's just like, I can see Trump sending some poor civil servant down somewhere after talking over and bullying and not answering any of his questions, not letting him ask the questions, and him making an arse of himself down there because he's not meant to be there. And of course, what came in and the first words out of his mouth were, did you do the lesson? And I went, no, I didn't do the fucking lesson. And my brother leapt in the way because he could tell I was getting angry. And then a few months later, he said, I need you to come and mind this lesson. I've got to leave early. I says, I'm not allowed to do that, Tim. Oh no, it'll be fine for 15 minutes. I'm pretty sure it's illegal. It'll be fine. And I didn't turn up. And then he told us I was undependable. I better go now. People, eh? Yeah, do you know what? Trump will have his head. We've got him for 4 years. He didn't blow the world up the last time. I really don't want to end on a gloomy note. That's my opinion of Trump as a person. This is a very long video. I might have to do another one about what I think that would affect as a president, but I better go and calm down now. Sorry about that.